There you go. You're alive.
I need to start with prayer then. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the worship that we've had and the teaching. I just pray for the technology and for my words that I would speak your truth. In your name I pray.
Amen.
Okay, so this first slide is just a brief review of why where did you get the title, None of These Diseases? So Exodus 15, 23 through 26, they came to Marah, but they could not drink the water at Marah because it was bitter. So Moses cried out to the Lord. The Lord showed him a tree. Interestingly enough, I think there was a large tree that was hit by lightning. It was basically turned into charcoal. So he threw this large chunk of charcoal into the water at Marah and fixed the water. When he threw it into the water became drinkable. The Lord made a statute and ordinance for them at Marah, and he tested them there. He said 4 things. If you will carefully obey the Lord your God, do what is right in his sight, pay attention to his commands, and keep all his statutes, I'll not inflict any illness on you that I inflicted on the Egyptians, for I'm the Lord who heals you. Some translations, I will inflict on you none of these diseases that I inflicted on the Egyptians. So let's briefly review what we covered first. We know Moses was led by God to record his commands, which maintain the health of the Hebrew people, in contrast to the practices of the Egyptians, the Canaanites, and other pagan people. So God told Moses, for example, how to deal with leprosy. You simply isolate the ill person. That was done by the Hebrews, and it effectively contained leprosy. And then 4,000 years later, that was rediscovered by some more modern countries, like Norway had an epidemic of leprosy, and they said, hey, let's try what Moses said to do. And it worked. But it worked so well that they thought, well, maybe it's not what we did, maybe it was just going away. So they relaxed, and the epidemic came back until they finally made it a law. Okay, Semmelweis was obstetrician in 1847, and I won't give you the whole story again, but he discovered the importance of hand washing to interrupt the spread of life-threatening illness. In the 1850s, not long after that, there's a guy named Chadwick in England who was on the health board, and he said, hey, why don't we separate sewage from drinking water? Novel idea. To us today, we understand about germ theory and all that, but they did not know that in 1850. And then they had another habit. The funeral business was a pretty big business, but until you had the money, they would make the dead person lay in your home and rot. And so sometimes it was 8 or 10 days before they could come up with enough money for a funeral. And you may have if there were body lice, they might have left the cold dead corpse and gone to the warm people. So everyone in the family might get sick and die. So we talked about the damages of alcohol abuse, other substances, cigarette smoking. The Bible speaks to not specifically cigarette smoking, but it speaks to things that we do to our body. We talked about the risk and benefits of newborn circumcision and why God said to do it on the 8th day. And we discussed the whole source of wholeness and the physical wholeness. And today, we're going to go to sexual wholeness and emotional wholeness. We're going to go through these items. So, what happened to God's plan for sexuality? We'll discuss many ways that sinful man has detoured from God's plan. God's plan involved the spiritual side of man, and he gave the secret of great sex, which we'll talk about. First, we're going to talk about man's failures. So let's go right into homosexuality. Is there a gay gene that causes one to be born gay? Genetics plays a role, but there's not a gene that determines that. You can look at identical twin studies, which we've used through the years for a variety of illnesses. If one twin chooses a gay lifestyle, the second twin has a 50% or less chance of the same choice. That's just based on studies. If there is a gene determining this choice, the chance should be quite a bit higher in identical twins with identical parents who treat them very similarly, identical surroundings, shared identities, perfect genetic match. There should be a much higher chance that the other twin would choose that same life. And then the author throws in this statement, which I thought was confusing. He said genes may produce leanings toward homosexuality but do not cause it. To me, that was just confusing. Then I went to a non-scientist, Charles Krauthammer, who is a reporter, writer for the Washington Post, and he says science has nothing to say to either side of the gay rights debate. These are not necessarily facts, these are for discussion. The tolerance or discouragement of homosexuality is a question to be decided according to what people believe about the value, morality, and the chances for happiness of a homosexual life. The science is irrelevant. Well, it's possible that the science simply does not support the claims of homosexual activists. It's not irrelevant, it just doesn't support the claims. So, confusing sexual experiences may influence homosexual tendencies. It's interesting, this has been supported by multiple studies. Most lesbians were sexually abused by men in childhood, leading to fear of intimacy with men. Boys may be confused by early homosexual encounters. And during puberty, some children sense a vague same-sex attraction, which usually fades when they begin to notice the opposite sex. But if counseled that these attractions mean they're gay, the child is confused even more. Other things that contribute to homosexual tendencies, first of all, we allow our gay culture to attract innocent children. Second, gay propaganda says that gays are not recruiting our children because you're either gay or you're not. A leopard can't change his spots. They're saying that some youth are destined to a gay life. But we know that lonely or insecure young people are easy prey for homosexual hunters who promise instant sexual pleasures. So when tempted, some otherwise heterosexual men may try out gay sex. In fact, in prison, 30% practice homosexuality until they're released, and then they return to an exclusive heterosexual life. So what are some of the factors? A distant father for boys and girls is the most important factor in homosexual orientation. More than 80% of gay men, but only 18% of straight men have emotionally distant fathers. Boys who never experience a dad's masculine hug or backslap feel a strange mix of love and hatred for their father. They may search for male intimacy elsewhere. Boys with warm relationships with masculine fathers rarely turn to homosexuality. Proverbs 4 says, "When I was a son with my father, tender and precious to my mother, he taught me and said, your heart must hold on to my words. Keep my commands and live." A smothering mother may also destine a child for a homosexual lifestyle. These mothers often baby and restrict their boys, discouraging sports, preventing dates, forcing them into girlish activities. And these boys may still sleep in their mother's bed as teens. They may harbor a hidden rage toward their mom for this. It takes intense pressure to alter our inborn sexual identity. And boys resist feminization and girls resist masculinization. But unisex parenting ignores centuries of human wisdom, goes against the Bible teaching, and confuses children. Smothering mothers also tend to be spiteful wives. They're openly despising and degrading the dad. And these moms are nothing like the biblical wife described in Proverbs 31. She rewards him with good, not evil, all the days of her life. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also praises her. When it comes to sex, 3 out of 4 mothers of gay men talked about sex as dirty and disgusting, an act deserving merely to gratify male animal lust. Many psychiatrists blame religion for teaching women to avoid sex. They'd be surprised to read the Song of Solomon, which really talks about biblical sex as something passionate, not sexually frigid, but with marital fidelity. So, gay activists talk about mature monogamous people with lasting, loving, gay relationships. Few actually ever achieve that. A full 75% of gay men do most of their sex acts with men they don't even know. 30% of gay men have more than 1,000 lifetime partners. And there was a study of 100 stable gay couples who lived together for 5 years. Not one couple had remained sexually faithful. The authors concluded that lasting, faithful relationships do not exist in the, quote, normal homosexual lifestyle. And then comes down to this compulsive copulation, sex with countless partners. It's not normal for human beings. It's a sign of neurosis. So we're going to talk
And
about
that last bullet here, though, that's not restricted to the gay community. I mean, that is prevalent in the single world today.
Right.
If they don't make you happy, just try another one.
Right. We're gonna,
Get married.
yeah, we're gonna come back to that too. So God calls people of faith, that's us, to draw lines and build bridges, to set boundaries, but reach out to those living outside of those boundaries. The gay life can never be an acceptable alternative to God's creation model, Genesis 1:27, where God made humanity in the image of God, male and female. And sex is healthy only in the context of God's plan, a marriage between a man and a woman. So that kind of targets a large percentage of our young single population. A man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they'll become one flesh. This book was published in 2000, or it was last revised in 2000. Only 4% of married people commit adultery in a given year. I don't have any reason to not believe that, while 100% of gay couples are unfaithful in 5 years. So sex has boundaries, but God's love has no boundaries. So we're called to express God's love. So the gay marriage movement is not about reality. It's about social acceptance and political power. The Bible obligates us to condemn such behavior. We don't hate gays, but their behavior is not gay. It's sad. It's not beneficial. It's destructive. It's not right. It's wrong. I'm saying this to you guys. Would I go stand on the street corner and preach this? I think I might have to establish a relationship with that person before I could say this is what I believe to be true. But we don't hate gays. We must say, you matter to God, you matter to us, but your ideas for redefining the family are wrong. They're confusing to our young people. They're sowing seeds of disease and despair. Jesus cares about sinners and the sick and the suffering. This goes back to the homosexual neurosis idea. Before 1974, the Academy of Psychiatry called homosexuality a neurosis. But homosexual activists kept disrupting their meetings, and they finally caved in and said, okay, homosexuality is no longer a psychological disturbance. But many studies have confirmed that homosexual men score abnormally high on tests measuring for neurosis. Here's some of the following traits: a sense of inferiority, self-centeredness, that's striving to get love, not to give love, sexual obsession with homosexual thoughts dominating them, self-pity, a compulsive craving for sex, and anger. So the author says the correct term for this neurosis would be same-sex sexual addiction. Is help possible? All right, up to 60% of gay men will turn to some form of counseling. Like, why am I unhappy? What can I do to make my life better? But most therapists are going to work towards self-acceptance and deny any need to change their sexual preference, even if desired. But many have actually succeeded in leaving that lifestyle. We know that failure and relapses are common to treatment of all neuroses. There are many other neuroses. Modest cure rates simply show that cures are difficult, but not impossible. In the first century, Paul described the sexually immoral, participants in homosexual acts, thieves, greedy, alcoholics. This is 1 Corinthians 6. And then he gave hope for sexual strugglers. In verse 11, he said, and some of you used to be like this, but you were washed, sanctified, justified in the name of Jesus. Another message of hope after treating more than 100 homosexual men and women, Dr. Gerard van den Aardweg said, religious conversion can afford a homosexual the hope and energy he wants for his struggle. Luke 5:31-32. Jesus replied, it is not those who are healthy who need a doctor, but those who are sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. All of us fight an ongoing struggle against different types of moral failure. To one degree or another, we're all in a state of recovery. Thank God, the power of God present in us, the Spirit, is available to anyone who wants to be cleaned up and start fresh.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Your first bullet, though, and it's very sad, but if you look at the Methodist Church, they've confused that even more because they now fully accept that gay lifestyle is okay and you can be part of the church. They have,
You can be
down on
pastors.
SMU campus, they have a gay pastor on staff at Southern Methodist University, the church that sits there on that corner, and they, I believe, do an alternate service that is geared towards the LGBTQ whatever crap.
I realize that my presentation
No, you're
is
good. I'm just-
behind the time.
No, you're perfect. I'm just throwing out that makes it even harder
To talk
when
about it
someone's-
publicly.
Yeah. Well, I've got. It's kind of wild. I've got two friends that I've worked with over the years. Both of them had been married for a number of years. One had 2 kids, and he about 5 years ago divorced his wife and said, "I've been gay all along." But he's found a church there in Kentucky that he and his partner go to, and they accept him. And so he is, he and I've talked. We're friends, and he knows how I feel. But he is convinced that he was born that way. He said he always felt it. Anyway, that church accepting that that's okay just further blurs his struggle or acceptance that, oh, no, this is the way I was born.
For that gay person, and
Yeah.
also for young people who are looking
His
for
kids,
truth.
I'm worried about his son and daughter that they now have a gay father that they grew up, he worked in the church, was regular, sang on the choir, the whole bit, and now he decided he's gay, but still goes to a church, still does all the same stuff. Yeah, it's problematic.
Yeah, it's the doctor in the 50s who's x-raying or taking a look at somebody who's smoking a cigarette on the exam table while the doctor is smoking a cigarette. It's just like, okay, where do you have a chance to go find healing in that environment?
Yeah,
right?
exactly, sir.
For me, it's the third bullet, because again, this is, I think, the one argument that they make that I think is relevant is that for some reason we elevate this sin above others, which I, to some extent, will agree with, because again, identity is so important in the Bible, right? Who you are is key to your understanding of your relationship to God, etc., etc. So I think identity sins are very powerful in things like this. But again, the point of this is to say, look at the problems with pornography. Look at the problems with the fact that in heterosexual marriages, 0 of them make it, in 5 years without straying. But again, religious people still have a divorce rate equal with secular people. All of us need to take a look at number 3. and understand that, again, we all struggle with, these issues.
I'm gonna make an argument there, though, because I get it. Those are people that claim Christianity. I had this, after your message yesterday, or after your teaching yesterday, I actually talked to a group, and one of the things that, when they do those kind of polls, they just ask people, are you Christian? And that's where that divorce rate, I would strongly argue that if you find churches such as ours, do we have divorces? Of course we do. Are they at a 50% pace in the, what I will call the real body of Christ? Because everyone says the church.
Yeah.
Well, they're including every Catholic, every Methodist,
All the Presbyterians.
the whole thing, versus those who have picked that Bible that on this word I will stand and nothing outside of it. I think if you look at marriages within that versus, I think then you see a big difference. So there's a pretty strong distinction.
No, I think so too. Bob can attest to this, because again, he was on the elder board. We're not struggling with dozens of people in marriage crisis in our church, right? But we struggle with 2 or 3 for months, and stuff like this, right? So
Christy knows where all my guns are, so I'm just,
Christy believes in murder, not in divorce.
Yeah, told that to us I think, right, there was another study that said, over 50% of Christians don't regularly read their Bible. And I'm like, don't sound like Christians to me.
Exactly.
But I think kind of on this too, it's important, as you mentioned on step 3, it is important to recognize that everybody's cross is different.
Right.
And some people's crosses, when you look at a grand scheme of things, you could argue, there are people whose life by the age of 25 looks so different than mine and is so hard, and it's like, I can't imagine how you've come to this right now. And I think it's important to recognize that everybody is carrying a cross, and everybody's cross is different. And so you can't, some people will struggle with same-sex attraction, and that's just not something that I haven't had to struggle with, and that's just a different cross, that we. So I think that is key to recognize that as you mentioned.
cross,
Yeah.
That's the problem. People are trying to tell them you don't have a cross to carry.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I definitely recognize that, but I do think that, and this is something that I found recently is it's in I think it was in Colossians. No, it's not. Maybe Corinthians. Paul says, I urge you not to associate with the sexually immoral.
Yeah.
So he says that, and then he says, not at all meaning to not associate with the sexually immoral of this world, because that's impossible.
Exactly.
And then he says, but I urge you not to associate with the sexually immoral, the greedy, the wicked, the liar. He lists off a bunch of stuff of the church. And you are to judge those. God is to judge the world.
Yeah.
And I look at both of those and I think, I don't know as if Christians, as we do a great job with either of those things. I think we are very quick to judge the world, which it says that is God's job to judge the world. And even in the church, on some stuff that I think we think is pretty minor, of like a white lie or some other stuff, we gotta sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
And I think we are called to address other Christians and call them out on their garbage. And I feel like, recently I read that passage and I'm like, why isn't this passage talked about more? Because I feel like we are very quick to not associate with the sexually immoral of the world, or judge the sexually immoral of the world, which I think Paul is explicitly saying, that's not what I was asking of you guys.
Yeah.
That those are the people who need you the most.
Right, not what Jesus did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not what Jesus did. And so I think those are the people we're trying to say, this is a cross that you need to carry. This is something that we need to work on, and I'm willing to work alongside you with this. And on that note, I gotta take my family home to get my son. I wanted to announce that so you didn't think I was looking for other reasons.
I was praying for some good discussion. Thank you very much, all of you. I didn't want to just read this.
We'll dug it out.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
See you, brother.
I got one more thing to say, I guess, one doesn't go. I've been thinking, these people that say, I've been born like this, and that's the way God made them. Well, if they believe in God in such a manner, and He still calls homosexuality a sin, just as He
here.
So just to play on that, God didn't make us that way. He made us male and female. How we acted out is different.
Well, and he told Moses for this sin, capital punishment.
That's true.
I mean,
We are in Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
okay,
You can call space.
I welcome any and all discussion. We got time, so I'm gonna go on. The next step is actual disease, infectious disease, that when AIDS first struck, many felt safe, because I'm not homosexual, I'm not a heroin addict, I'm not a Haitian, I'm not a hemophiliac, but some said AIDS was God's punishment on homosexuals. Others said, oh, well, science is going to find a cure and a vaccine and we'll be fine. Then you have heterosexuals like Magic Johnson, said he could have caught this virus from any one of 100 different women. He's boasting that he had that many partners. In 1994, the Washington Post reported, quote, AIDS is unlikely to become widespread in the general population. Today, in the U.S., heterosexual intercourse is the fastest growing way to catch HIV. Worldwide, over 90% of cases confirm this. AIDS in women. AIDS infections are increasing more rapidly among young women than any other group. And I think that's the reason is going to become more obvious in a moment. A study of a cluster of HIV infection among heterosexual people without apparent risk factors. No one was, there was no prostitutes, no drug users, no blood transfusions. But this one HIV positive man had 19 women partners with no risk factors. Most were white, middle class, 30-something women. Almost half were married. Only 4 had subsequently slept with more than one partner. 11 tested positive for HIV. And 1 woman had already spread it to another partner. So, get back to the Bible stance, you're at risk unless you have only one lifetime partner who has never had sex with another person. Today, HIV is becoming a teen disease. Soon, most HIV may be caught in the teen years. The teens are being warned by MTV, by teachers and parents, but they have little real fear of AIDS. They're told that condoms are the answer, but they don't use them consistently. Part of it is they don't think their friends have AIDS. Their friends look well, and in fact, it takes an average of 10 years after you become infected to become ill. By the year 2000, the average age at time of infection was about 17 and going down. AIDS in orphans. Some victims are babies with AIDS. Most women who get AIDS are single mothers and realize their children will become orphans. In America, more children lose a parent to AIDS than to motor vehicle accidents. That was a new stat for me. In Africa, more than 10 million children were orphaned by AIDS by the year 2000. Even if we have an effective vaccine, it would take 25 years to decrease the number of people with AIDS. So we're expecting 300 million victims in the next few decades worldwide, not just in this country. AIDS in the church. Okay, we're back to, we've already had a really good discussion about that.
Hey, Tom,
Yes,
did you see, it just came out this weekend, did you see that there's a research group that, and not that to despair, but I just found it, I thought you would be a doctor. They've been able to coax the AIDS virus out of a cell. They've come up with a manipulation factor that they can coax. It's the first time they've ever been able to do it. It was really, you need to go look at it, go find the article, is pretty fascinating.
okay. And how many of us think that God's gonna go, okay, well, I'll take this curse away from man. Let him behave. I know,
Whether you
I'm not
consider it a curse.
picking on you, I'm saying.
No, but we're in a fallen world, so I don't know that it's a curse. I don't believe that. We had too many people coming out and say it was a direct curse on homosexuality. I believe we live in a fallen world, and therefore what we pay the consequences for the things we do, and therefore attack that community. But just like you said, it's just as prevalent in the sexually active community now as it is the
Yeah.
homosexual community.
I'm using it in the sense of leprosy was a curse,
Yes.
cholera was a curse, is a curse. So AIDS challenges us, the church, to live out our mission of mercy. In the face of AIDS, the church must be a caring community, a place where people with AIDS can find help and hope during their time of trial. None of us can escape the consequences of AIDS. Anyone can get it. Every church will face a great challenge to show the love of Jesus. Romans 14, for none of us lives for himself, a solitary life, and none of us dies for himself, a solitary death. AIDS affects us all, basically. It's all of our problem.
I think the point in church though, you have to ask for help. Like, this is not really something a lot of people want to share that they're struggling with.
So a church might have some teaching that says, hey, you can get hope and help here. The church might have support group, or I can see things the church can do.
I've just never heard of anyone in my circle with AIDS. So I'm like,
Right.
the stats seem pretty large for my reality. So maybe I just am around too many church people, I don't know.
This is a big part of your reality.
Well,
right
if you
here.
look at a global population of,
Churchgoers again.
well, but this is talking about a global population. When he said, what was it, 300 million will die over the next
Few
2 or 3
decades.
I'm not trying to be morbid or mean with billions. I mean, just go take China and India alone. Between them, they've got 2.5 billion people. The chances of in a church group, one, that someone would acknowledge it, and two, that it would be openly known, is fairly slim.
Okay.
The people that I've known, it's always in the workplace that someone gets really sick and it comes out that they've got HIV and are fighting it. I've only known a couple of people in my whole career, because just like you said, there's a stigma. People don't, because that immediately says they were sexually,
Overactive.
yes, or something of that nature. Even though everybody, quote unquote, accepts that, once you get this, oh, look, that's the bad guy. I think that's the reason you probably don't hear about it even in your workplace, unless you personally know somebody that goes through it.
Yeah.
So a little more recent history. In America, this thing called the sexual revolution really took hold in the 60s. And in August of 1969, right after I graduated from high school, for 3 days on Max Yasgur's farm in New York, the Woodstock Music Festival, I wasn't there, entertained
That's why I call them brats.
500,000 middle-class brats with free sex, drugs, rock and roll. They called it the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Well, a year later, Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin were dead from drug overdoses. And those who wanted all this free sex, some of them got a lifetime of herpes, genital warts, pelvic inflammatory disease, and a host of other sexually transmitted diseases. At Woodstock, no one talked about consequences. They got a shot of penicillin for gonorrhea or syphilis. They took Quell lotion for body lice and scabies. That's all they needed. Now we have no cure for AIDS, herpes. We have treatment, but we don't have a cure. PID, scarring with infertility, that's from chlamydia. So,
That was
long-
really the beginning of Romans 1 for our nation. I don't know, really expanded at that point.
sexually, it really took off in the 60s. So long ago, there was no CDC publishing weekly counts of STDs. When I was in school and practicing, every week the CDC gave these statistics and totals. But in ancient times, Canaanite pagan priests would ritually rape the teenage girls just before their marriages. This was considered a fertility rite. They hoped the gods would be pleased and bless them with many children. Unfortunately, they often got chlamydia from the priest, which left them barren. No other ancient Mideastern culture besides the Hebrews, seems to have outlawed temple prostitution. The ancient Hebrew Bible did not just ignore these disease-causing rituals, but forbade them Deuteronomy 23 forbade Hebrews being cult prostitutes, male or female. And even says, don't bring the money that you make being a cult prostitute into the temple. You know, it's abhorrent to God. Well, America just became a sex lab. Proverbs 5:3-5, the Bible warns that free sex will bring no age of Aquarius. Instead, America has basically reverted to the sexual practices of the ancient Canaanites. All sorts of sexual perversion is considered experimentation, which is like, it's a good thing. You're experimenting. Our scientists at the CDC publish the weekly results. Millions of cases, AIDS, herpes, HPV, gonorrhea, syphilis, PID, chlamydia, and more. These results give scientific proof for the truth of God's precepts. Let's, in a very important related thing, let's talk about a woman's right. A woman has a right to be a virgin until marriage, and that gives her power. There is, however, a gender gap. Just surveying American college students, women desire intimacy, men desire pleasure, and behave accordingly. But no, the girl saying no is the source of sexual power. 1 Corinthians 6, your body is a sacred place, so treat it with dignity and respect. Let's discuss this statement. Casual sex will never be emotionally safe. Any discussion on that?
Well, that's because women desire intimacy. So it's never emotionally safe because they want that relationship.
So if they do it the biblical way,
Yeah.
in which we're going to get to, let's call it saved sex, not savored sex.
Just a comment from a guy here. I think guys want intimacy as well. But we're told that we want pleasure. And so I think...
I'm not arguing that because I'm your teacher up here, but I think guys want
Oh, of course. They do. They're
first and
certainly-
foremost. That intimacy thing sounds pretty good too.
Right, but I think in the end, what they still really need is intimacy. And
Okay,
they
need
it-
and want.
They
You got
need
two different.
monogamous intimacy.
Yeah.
And again, talking from within the church, and I'm talking about a couple that both have accepted Christ and are actively trying to follow that, versus the world out there that has scales on their eyes and it's Hollywood driving it. If you were watching a movie last night that had a gay couple, I said, that's the required gay couple,
Yeah.
because if they must have filmed in California, because you cannot make a television show or a movie in California anymore. It is required, legally required, that you have a gay affiliation in it. Anyways, but I think there's a difference, because my Bible tells me, love my wife as Christ did the church and be willing to lay down my life for her. If I'm doing that, I'm looking out for her, both in our sexual partnership, but also just in our life, which makes her more interested in me because I actually am responsive. Don't say anything. When she asks me to do stuff, and, or at least there's a desire to be that way. Does that make sense?
You have the right intentions.
And so, and I do it most of the time. But I think back to what George was talking about, I absolutely crave the intimacy that I have. But I think guys out there without Christ, it's in there somewhere, but they have been their entire lives, even their dad's telling them, don't you dare cry, you know, shake it off, all that stuff. Man, they've been conditioned so heavily that I just need some pleasure and I'll be fine because I'm a dude.
Okay.
Yeah, even sexual innuendos and jokes, and especially within the church, it sends a message that sex is just pleasure. It's not intimate, it's not spiritual, it's not important to a healthy relationship.
Maybe I'm standing too close to the thermostat.
It just got warm.
We can still
Okay.
hear you though.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
That's why we have this.
Yep, we're still.
So Hebrews 13:4 says, let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. So there's your saved sex. But man wants freedom from God's rules or law. Man wants what he wants with no consequences. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
Okay, a few specifics. Our condemnation. Americans, you like that title? Americans with multiple sex partners, only 1 in 6 will consistently use condoms. We talk about condoms all the time, but 1 in 6. And there's no proof that condom education slows the STD epidemic. It actually increases the frequency because it says to the kids, it's okay, do this. And therefore, because the use of condoms is imperfect, it increases the spread of STDs. There's also no proof of HIV risk reduction with condoms. Again, it tells kids teen sex is normal and acceptable. It also does not alter adult behavior and doesn't replace abstinence education. Abstinence is moral, intelligent, normal, fulfilling, loving, and safe according to the Bible. And we can have more discussion on that, but I want to get through as much as I can here. So let's talk about preferences versus values. Proverbs 14:12 talks about that. Our personal preferences can change on a whim. It's like quicksand. Our biblical values never change, so teens can stand safe on this moral Gibraltar. Teens are risk takers. Proverbs 5:23. We're not going to read all of these. Condoms, on the other hand, may be defective, rupture, come off, have holes 50 times larger than the HIV virus. And the FDA allows a condom lot to leak 4 per 1,000. So definitely not perfect. During marital sex, less than 2% of condoms break. During casual sex, 5 to 20% break, depending on the vigor of the sex. One study says condoms may reduce the HIV risk by 69%. You look at that, 1/3 failure rate. That's what if your seatbelt in your car failed 1/3 of the time, or your bumpers on your car failed? Not good. So fact-based fear based on facts. Stop. Sex outside of marriage can wreck your life. There was even a law in 1987, not too long ago, that said we should emphasize abstinence outside of marriage. That's been ignored. Drug education. We just say no. We don't say be careful with your drug use. We say no. Well, that should apply to sex education also. 1 Thessalonians 4, don't abuse your body with lustful passion. And Proverbs 5, again, God made sex for pleasure and procreation, not anxiety and STDs. So save sex for marriage. All right. Let's talk about spiritual sexuality. God created our soul and body with sex as part of the divine design for human dignity. The author says, hey, should we pray before sex? Thanks for what we're about to receive. Not a bad idea. Romantic love is an illusion. Only God can fill the wide hole in our heart. Intimacy requires transparency and willingness to open up. Romans 12:9. The spiritual journey is it's not just this amazing climb, it's everyday walk with ups and downs. What's the secret of great sex? It's agape love, which involves commitment, care, respect, tolerance, forgiveness. And that kind of love never fails. It's interesting to compare other religions. Love is unique to Christians compared to other religions. Muhammad taught judgment, not love. In Islam, God is remote and inaccessible. Buddha taught escape, not love. Confucius taught conformity. But Jesus taught love. Only the Bible reveals to us God is love. Jesus was calling us to this intimate relationship with the creator of the universe. He also calls us to live in that same love relationship with others. So love was a revelation from God himself. But we're all like porcupines with irritating spines or unlovable qualities. I see lots of patting and touching going on here. So people close to us get poked, and they love us in spite of our faults. We can love because we have been loved so much, and because He has forgiven all our sins. Luke 7:47. She loves much. Jesus talking about the woman, because she has been forgiven much. And of course, 1 Corinthians 13 describes that agape love. So sex without love smothers the soul, that spiritual side. Unselfish love is necessary for great sex. Maturity is needed for a happy marriage. And 1 Corinthians 13, we must wish more to give than to receive. This was kind of interesting. I threw this in here. Not trying to make anybody nervous, but the largest survey of American sexuality surprised many. It found that conservative Protestant women were more likely to reach orgasm every time. Rather than being sexually repressed, these women more likely believe in the holiness of marriage and of sexuality as an expression of their love for their husbands. 1 Corinthians 7, God designed sex as a beautiful expression of love between a man and his wife. Okay, we're going to switch from sexual wholeness to emotional wholeness, and we've got 9 minutes. Okay. I'm watching.
No stress.
Right. So stress now causes about 2/3 of visits to family physicians.
Yep.
And higher stress makes you more likely to catch everything from the common cold to many other medical problems. We are spiritual beings. Our spirituality is what the Bible calls the image of God, imago Dei. Our spirit or soul is born with a need to know and experience God. And without that, we're in chaos, longing for peace. So, what happens? Your mind interprets that unrest as fear, anxiety, worry, anger, other emotions. Your brain has these primal circuits that start sending off alarm signals throughout the body. Without asking your permission, your glands release adrenaline, cortisone, insulin, and other stress hormones. And organs are then overexcited, resulting in stress. So the spirit, the pneuma, upsets the mind, the psyche, and thus the body, the soma. He says we should call this pneuma psychosomatic illness. Depression, for example, can cause symptoms from back and neck spasms to more chronic pains, fibromyalgia. Now, yes, genetics, age, nutrition, exercise, other factors play a role. The healthy spiritual and emotional life generally leads to a healthier physical body.
So in my practice, we also ask about meds when people come in. We never put in the antipsychotics, just because there's a bunch of HIPAA stuff you have to go through if it's in your record. But there is an alarming number of young people who are on antipsychotics. It's amazing how many meds, and most of them just material like this. It's like they have no emotions, they're very robotic, and it's just sad to see how many kids are on these kinds of medications.
Some of that's a condemnation of the medical profession.
Well, and it's like, well, if you're unhappy, then you must be depressed. Let's get you on medication. It's not let's do some happy things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have to give kudos to my eye doctor, who's in the room. And they ask you every time, are you having a problem with dry eyes? And so finally I said, yeah, that may be an issue. And with a very simple test, she could tell me that my tear production was 20% of normal.
Wow.
No wonder I have dry eyes. I thought the blinking was a nervous tick. I'm like, my psyche's all messed up. But it had to do with tear production. So anyway.
So you need to cry more.
Or you're crying too much.
Tear depletion.
Yeah.
I don't know about either of those suggestions. She gave me another suggestion that worked. Goop that you put in your eye at bedtime, then you can't see where you're going for a while. So Better go to the bathroom before you put that.
Sounds like the voice of experience.
Absolutely. Okay. So arteriosclerosis, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but it clogs up the arteries to our major organs. A lifesaver lifestyle includes a low-fat diet, losing weight, exercising, quitting smoking, and managing stress. Now, interesting, Leviticus 7:22, God told Israel to not eat any of the fat of cattle, sheep, or goats, but to burn the fatty portion all night until only ashes remain. Then they take those ashes and they store them in a place outside of the camp, and they can use them for various healing things. When you clean up the environment, you mix water with those ashes, and I won't go into all that. I think we did that last time. So God intended, let's talk about work. God intended Adam and Eve to work in the garden, Genesis 2:15. He told us to work 6 days a week in Exodus 20, verse 9. And he meant real exercise, not just sitting at a desk. And I'm not trying to throw rocks at all of us that sit at desks. Stress has many adverse effects on us. Psalm 34 gives an answer. It says, I saw the Lord, and he answered me and rescued me from all my fears. But a stress-free life probably does not exist. Like Romans 5 says, our affliction produces endurance. Not only that, we also boast in our afflictions, because we know that affliction produces endurance. Endurance produces proven character. Proven character produces hope. This hope will not disappoint us, because God's love has been poured out in our hearts through the Holy Spirit who was given to us. So the goal is not no stress, the goal is optimum stress. You see someone with no stress, they may not be very motivated. So anyway, the goal is optimum stress with a sense of control over our stress. And guess what? People of faith tend to cope with stress better. So without God, life is a dangerous expedition into the unknown. The stress just never stops. Psalm 23, familiar to us all, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Now, to avoid burnout from stress, we need to balance 3 dimensions: work, play, and worship. You think of it as a triangle. Jesus taught his disciples to get away from the crowds, to rest. There's many other examples. There were multiple times when he told them they needed to get away. Okay, so faith makes fit. In 1863, the skeptics mocked Dr. Semmelweis's idea for hand washing, even though he had proven that good hand washing between doing the autopsy and examining the living woman dramatically reduced her death rate. And he did this in 2 different hospitals, and just because his colleagues were against the idea of so much hand washing, he was not accepted. Well, in 1963, when this book was first published, there were similar skeptics that said, can faith really produce health? Could church visits really reduce hospital visits? Could prayer really replace pills? And back then there were a few studies that had looked at those questions, but since then there's been hundreds of studies that have examined the relationship of faith and health, and 80 to 90% of those studies agree that faith makes fit and doubt makes sick. Even in 1995, there was a conference at Harvard Medical School about faith and health. It showed things like weekly church attendance, daily Bible reading, and a constant attitude of prayer are great medicines. Weekly church goers in a Maryland study were 50 to 75% less likely to die from 'from 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 that Jesus expected faith to heal both body and soul, and he used the same Greek word, sozo, for both. Mark 10, Jesus told blind Bartimaeus, your faith has healed, sozo, you. And in Luke 7, Jesus forgave a woman's sins and said, your faith has saved, sozo, you. So, science has rediscovered what the psalmist said in Proverbs 10:27, the fear of the Lord prolongs life. And I've got, this is the list of all the scriptures I used today, and I will, I'll somehow make that available to you guys.
Dude, Tom, that was awesome.
Any questions? Okay, thank you for your discussion more than anything. That was great.
Do we need to go to the church back?